on YouTube, Facebook, and X. And for the premier sports talk experience, tap into our Roku channel. Start your mornings with Mac and Jack covering all the weekend sports action. Then pour a cup and enjoy all the sports you can drink on the Coffee and Sports podcast. At midday, talk sports from east to west on the Coast to Coast podcast. Followed at night by some hot girl talk with Prim and Proper Sports featuring Sonia Pearson. Talk boxing on the Gloved Fist. Yankee fans tune in for Start Spreading the News. And there's more on the College Sports Huddle and Sports Scope with Robert Butler. And that's just a sampling. There are 20 podcasts in all and 70 weekly shows giving us a 3.4-star viewer rating. To find us on Roku TV, search for National Streaming Sports on the Roku search bar. Click on the logo and you're in. For laptops, mobile phones, and tablets, download the Roku app. National Streaming Sports, live and on demand sports talk for America.
Football season is here, and SeatGeek is my go-to for buying tickets. Now, with SeatGeek, every single ticket is backed with their buyer guarantee. We've all had plans change, and when you can't make it to the big game, SeatGeek has you covered. They're the only ticketer that allows you to return your tickets ahead of the event for credit with SeatGeek swaps. So when things come up, I know that my tickets won't go to waste. So what are you waiting for? Download the
All right, Mac, thank you so much, everybody. You just got me today. Paul is at Disney World with his family, and you're going to have another guest, Tim Cable, coming in shortly. But it is wonderful here to talk to you all about Yankees baseball. We have another week of absolutely no news. That is, nothing has happened other than rumors. We're going to talk about some of those rumors, talk about some of the players that might end up in pinstripes. And one player that won't end up in pinstripes, and his name is Roki Sasaki. And that's kind of bad news, but maybe it's expected news. We'll just start right there. Roki Sasaki is not going to be a Yankee. He has ruled out the Yankees. In fact, he's ruled out all but 3 teams. The 3 teams that he will go to are either the Dodgers, the Padres, or the Blue Jays. Good news is he's not going to the Red Sox. He's not going to the Orioles. He's not going to the Rays. He's not going to any of those teams. Probably going to the West Coast in the National League, which is kind of a best case scenario. Japanese players like playing on the West Coast. The one thing I've heard is that their families can actually watch the games when they're on the West Coast, whereas it's not really possible when they're on the East Coast. And so that's why you see a lot of these guys kind of staying on the West Coast. I get it. I don't really fault anybody there. And the Yankees put their best foot forward. They're not going to get them. That also provides some clarity. Oh, there's Tim Cable. Tim, how are you?
Fine. How are you?
Tim, I am doing wonderful. We don't need Paul tonight. We got just the 2 of us. And I was just saying that Roki Sasaki is not going to be a Yankee. Do you have a reaction?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little disappointing, but the way I viewed it, I thought they had a decent shot at it, but he was more of a luxury than a necessity.
Yeah, and if he ends up going to the Dodgers, it was foreseeable this entire time. One interesting thing is that there was a Dodgers international free agent that they committed to that signed elsewhere just now, probably indicating that maybe there'll be less money available for Dodgers IFAs than expected. So yeah, I'm not surprised 29 teams didn't get him. Seems like he probably wants to be in the West Coast. The Blue Jays are on his list of players, list of teams, of finalists. And I don't know. I'm kind of just happy he's not going to be, probably not going to be in the American League. Probably going to be in the Padres or Dodgers, which is what we said this whole time. The American League remains really weak at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think you're right. He probably will be either a Dodger or a Padre.
So we got some infielders to talk about, Tim. The same guys that, a different set of guys, but the same problem the Yankees have been dealing with basically since Christmas. What do you do about the last infield spot? And they clearly don't want Oswaldo Cabrera or Oswald Peraza, right? They're clearly trying to find an upgrade over those guys, either because they wouldn't have any depth if those guys are your starters, or because they just don't believe in them. I'm just curious, big picture, we've talked about a lot of guys for this infield spot. Like, how does that spot feel right now to you? Does it feel like the Yankees are going to end up in a really bad position like they've had with some positions in recent years, or do you think that they'll kind of be okay?
I think they'll be fine because I think, I think they need to make a move, but they're not rushing to make a move. So I think that they will get somebody. I think they were partially waiting to see what happened with Sasaki, to have an idea of what their roster was going to look like and so forth. I think it was interesting that today they signed Dominic Smith because he's not great by any stretch, but I think that will then allow them to trade Ben Rice.
Yeah, right. He's interesting depth because, he's a major league player. He's not a particularly good major league player, but you could imagine him, having a Yankee Stadium swing and looking pretty good. And then you're right. Rice is tradable. And now they know that they can't trade, say, like Clark Schmidt in order to get a starter because Sasaki won't be there. So yeah, I think you're right. The other thing is, Bregman hasn't signed and, the third base market might be kind of waiting on him. Arenado hasn't been traded, may not be traded. And so you're waiting on him. And so I feel like we haven't ruled out a big move, right? Maybe the Yankees need to trade Marcus Stroman before they can add any more to the payroll.
He could be part of the package too.
Yeah, right. I mean, you could imagine Stroman. I mean, I guess Stroman to the Cardinals has already been turned down, but maybe a 3-way trade or something like that.
Another team that they may look to now that the Tigers signed Gleyber Torres, they have a glut of infielders.
The Tigers. Let's look at the Tigers roster.
I read something about. I'm going to mispronounce his name. Jace Jung.
Let's take a look at Jace Young. Jace Young. He used to be a Met, right? Or Detroit? No, guess not.
His brother's on the Rangers, I think.
Yeah, he's got pretty good stats at least. Didn't have a great debut, but was pretty good in the minors. Really good in the minors. So yeah, I let me just look at their depth chart right here. So the Rangers have Torres playing second. Oh yeah, I know what you're thinking of here. So Torres is like a weird fit at second for them, I think, because they had to move Colt Keith to first or something like that. I forget exactly what the deal is, but Colt Keith is I think is a second baseman by training. So yeah, I can imagine someone with something with the Tigers. I look at the list of names. I want to talk about the specifics, but the list of names that they've been connected to recently, and it's not really they're not top prospects. They're just kind of slightly washed up veterans, right? They're veterans who aren't very good. And to me, that feels like they're aiming low. Now, maybe those names are out there because, they're trying to get someone else's asking price down. But the 3 names that I wrote a blog post about this that we actually have reporting linking them to, so not just, speculation, are Paul DeJong, Jorge Polanco, and Brendan Rodgers, which is not a great group of players. I'm not even sure if they're better than what the Yankees currently have. I want to go through them kind of one at a time and just talk about them. Talk about Paul DeJong, defensive shortstop. Do you have any hope for DeJong as a Yankee?
No, none of those names really inspire me. I think they'll do something else. I would just as soon go with Oswaldo Cabrera over any of those guys.
I agree. And DeJong, to me, is interesting in that, he had a quote unquote rebound season. So this is a guy who, when he first came up to the majors, was a really good player, right? I mean, DeJong was a 5-win player at one point in time, but that was during the juice ball. And he never was really able, like kind of Torres and a few others, really able to perform at a very high level, at any level really, without the juice ball. And he was always a really good defensive shortstop, but strikes out a ton and just doesn't hit the ball hard enough in order to really do much with it. I mean, he has been worth essentially negative WAR or replacement level from 2022 through 2023, and his rebound was a 700 OPS season. And if you look at his stats, what he did was he just kind of swung more. He closed his eyes and swung at every pitch. And I have no faith that when you're not on the White Sox that works. I think that teams will be smarter about throwing him fastballs, and he's just not going to hit 24 home runs ever again. He's a shortstop, and I think we kind of know what Paul DeJong is, and I'm with you. I think Cabrera is better than him. He just doesn't make much sense for this team unless you've utterly no faith in Oswald Peraza as a backup, and maybe you don't. But I can't imagine Peraza's worse than this, right? I mean,
no.
This is, yeah.
And Peraza is an excellent fielder, so.
Yeah, so you get that part out of him, and he's faster than DeJong. He's younger. There's like potential in Peraza, like he could actually establish himself and be good at something, and I just don't see that. Like I feel like Paul DeJong is only a little bit better than like Dom Smith, who the Yankees are probably going to play AAA. Right,
Paul DeJong is like a poor man's Isaiah Kiner-Falefa.
Right, yeah, exactly. Like an older Isaiah Kiner-Falefa who strikes out 30% of the time. Right, he strikes out as much as Giancarlo Stanton.
Yeah, you don't need that.
Yeah, that's a bad look. So yeah, I hope Paul DeJong is not the signee. Jorge Polanco, I want to save for last because he's at least a more interesting conversation. I think Brendan Rodgers is interesting in that he's a change of scenery candidate. He's been essentially a below average player throughout his career for the Rockies, an okay defender, either vacillates between below average and above average at second, but he really hits lefties. And I think that if you don't believe in Peraza, maybe you believe in Cabrera as one side of the platoon, but not as Peraza for the short side of the platoon. You got to go find someone who can hit lefties, and maybe that's Brendan Rodgers. Like I wouldn't be shocked if that he was the first name that I've seen that I was like, I can kind of see it. I still prefer Peraza because he's younger, right? He's faster, he's a better defender, he's got potential. But if you really think Peraza doesn't have the juice, like I could imagine Brendan Rodgers as a Yankee.
Yeah, again, it's not inspiring.
No, and the Coors Field could we have hopes that the Coors Field effect. That he doesn't lose too much of his production away from Coors Field. That's not uncommon for players. But on the other hand, he could just be awful, right? Like he could just not have anything. So yeah, I as you're the 25th guy in the roster that you're paying $1 million, sure. I just don't think if the Yankees sign him, I really have much faith beyond that. But if he could hit lefties and be the backup shortstop and a couple of other things, I think Rodgers is fine, just not impressive. That would be a thin player, I think. To me, the interesting name here is Jorge Polanco. Polanco can hit. He's been a pretty good hitter for the Twins for a while. Went to Seattle and was not very good, like everybody in Seattle. Seattle is just impossible to hit it, apparently. And my only concern is he can't play defense. He feels like Gleyber Torres, like a more consistent Gleyber Torres, maybe a lower ceiling, more consistent Gleyber Torres.
Yeah.
And like I get that we need a leadoff hitter, and that Polanco could be that guy if he rebounds to his previous level of production. But he also could just be like a declining middle infielder, right? Like he's kind of big. He's a big guy. He's 5'11", 208. And maybe he just can't play second anymore, and that's going to hurt his bat.
Yeah, and the other thing is especially, and not that one pitcher controls all your decisions, but with Max Fried, who gives up a lot of ground balls, you don't want somebody who's a liability in the infield.
Yeah, it's a good point. And even if you're planning on like platooning or something like that, you can't do that with a pitcher. Like the starting pitcher doesn't control who his opponent is. And right. So, you would have to play whatever, your backup second baseman, maybe Cabrera or Peraza, every time Fried plays, regardless of who's on the mound. And so you don't get that platoon advantage. But if you have two guys like Cabrera and Peraza who can both play defense, then that kind of settles some of the problem there. Yeah, I think you're right. I also I wish we could find a third baseman. Like I don't like Jazz Chisholm being playing third base. I prefer he plays second, so you get his defense at second, and then you find someone to play third. But all these guys we're talking about so far are all of those guys. Good. They're not that good, but also they would play second. So you also take a hit at third by moving Jazz over there.
Well, I think he was fine. I think he would get better, but if you could move him to second and get a good solid third baseman, that would be the better move.
Yeah, I think Jazz will be fine. I just with an actual spring training, he's just an athletic guy. He's good at defense everywhere. But you maybe not, right? Like maybe he's he wasn't a great shortstop, right? Maybe he's not good on that side of the infield. I just he didn't look natural over there, and I think you just you'd prefer to just put him back in a position that he has a lot of familiarity with and just kind of let him play, and then figure out third base, which you could do with Peraza Cabrera, you could do with Arenado, you could do with a lot of guys, but you can't really do with these guys who are all pure second basemen and not very good at it to begin with.
I did read about another possible trade.
Oh, who?
Alex Bohm.
Yeah, I've heard about
Phillies.
I've heard a little bit about Alec Bohm. Tell me about him.
Well, he's a right-handed hitter. I believe he's a pretty good defender. And he's not old. He's young, and he still has some control. So that might be a move to make.
Yeah, he was a guy he was a top prospect, and was a really his problem was he couldn't play defense until this year. And I haven't seen any I wasn't following the Phillies closely any reason why he became good. We have a couple of comments here from other people, and I'm curious if anybody here from our Philly audience can tell us did Bohm do something different? Did he change? We have a comment here from Angelo, which is asking, is the 40-man roster full, or is there an opening they should trade? So I think it might be technically full right now. Let me check it. That doesn't really matter because there's a lot of junk on the 40-man roster. So Angelo, so the 40-man roster has 4 open spots on it right now. So there's plenty of open space there. So that's not the problem. But I think Alec Bohm would solve a lot of problems. He's a right-handed hitter. You need a right-handed hitter. He's another guy who you probably don't want to bat high in the lineup, but is a guy if he's batting 7th, he's an asset. And he's going to be 28 years old. He's young, still has I think 2 years of team control. I don't understand why the Phillies want to trade him. Right? He was good, and the Phillies don't have a logjam at third base that I'm aware of. I wonder if they're just selling high, and so maybe they just they're willing to trade him if they can get a king's ransom for him, but not otherwise.
And I think they may have 1 or 2 guys in the minors that they think are ready, but I'm not positive.
Okay, so yeah, that'd be I think Bohm is a guy that we I think we talked about in November, and I think it makes a lot of sense, and just a question of cost, right? What are the Phillies willing to give up wanting for him? Let's talk about cost. So what would we trade for Spencer Jones? Let me come up with a couple of kind of barometers. So would you trade Spencer Jones for Alec Bohm?
Probably, because the thing is with Spencer Jones, you have to look at not only how close is he to the major leagues, but if you have Bellinger and you have Judge and you have Jason Dominguez, and of course you have Trent Grisham hanging around, what would be the avenue to get Spencer Jones up here?
I mean, I guess Jones, Bellinger, you can probably assume is gone after this season. He's got the opt-out. If he's any good, if you want to play him, he's probably going to leave. And so I think you can imagine him next year being on the team. My problem with Spencer Jones, and Mike Whiteman also agrees, yes, he would do the trade, is that I don't think he's any good. But I don't know where he's going to be on prospect lists. The internal Yankees list, I think Baseball America had him 5th in the system, in a weak system. I don't think he's going to be a top 100 prospect, or if he is, he'll be kind of in the back end of it. He strikes out a ton and really hasn't done it on the field. You can say he's been healthy. That's fine. He shows lots of batting practice home runs. I think the quote from Baseball America was he's the most athletic player in the minor leagues. Right. So he's even more athletic than Aaron Judge that we give a lot of, especially when he came up, for being not just big, but also fast. But he strikes out 37% of the time at Double-A, right? That's just not gonna fly. He still has some time. He's still younger than Judge was when Judge finally clicked, but Judge was a better player in the minors than Spencer Jones.
So, and he hasn't even made the AAA yet.
No, and I think you get eaten up at AAA. Because I mean, we're talking about a guy who basically, as soon as he gets to the high minors, he starts seeing real breaking pitches and just stops striking out. Started striking out a crazy amount. You need to go the other way. Judge was someone who struck out a ton and then got improved as he got older. But of course, Judge didn't break out until he hit the majors.
Correct.
So, I could imagine a world where Spencer Jones evolves into a really, really good prospect, but I think it's a low probability. And I think if that's what it takes to get, I'm not sure about Alec Bohm with only 2 years of control. I'm still a little hesitant on Jones just because he's so tantalizingly, the potential really is there. But a trade like that to me is interesting. And
maybe trade him to the Tigers for Young.
Something, a player with 3-4 plus years of control.
Right.
That's it. I'm still surprised that we got Jazz for as cheap as we did. Right. I don't even remember who we gave up for. We gave up Augustin Ramirez for Jazz Chisholm. The Yankees have guys like that in the system that they could offer in trades. Guys, questionable catchers in the high minors. I think that a trade like the Bohm trade, I think when we kind of look at it, will be cheaper than we thought. It won't be as expensive as it could have been. And so, yep.
They also have Everson Pereira coming back too.
Yeah, I feel I don't know if Bohm is those is at that level, but I feel like guys like Rice, Everson Pereira, who's younger than you think, Peraza, some of the pitchers in their high minors, some of the catchers they have in the high minors. I feel like those guys could get you a third baseman. I don't know. Again, I don't know if the Phillies are interested in that, but the Yankees have some of these post type prospects that do sometimes get traded. If Chase Hampton got traded, it wouldn't shock me at all. But you just got to find the guy. And I every day that goes by, the more I think we're going to end up with the status quo as the answer. And I'm just kind of okay with that. I think that in past years, we've seen the Yankees have multiple holes. So they would have, 4 guys spots in the roster that you just have no confidence going in, DJ LeMahieu and Aaron Hicks and Josh Donaldson and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, and then no depth behind that. And, now it's just kind of the third base spot. You're pretty happy with every other spot. Maybe Jason Dominguez you're a little bit concerned about, but I'm not. I think Dominguez will be fine. Right now you've got basically one lineup spot that's a problem, leadoff right now, but besides that, you got a lot of guys who are okay. Goldschmidt, Bellinger, Stanton, Chisholm, Wells, Dominguez. Those guys are all solid hitters. They're not Juan Soto, but none of them. They're better than the collective group. Some of the that you've had going into previous seasons, including last year, deep in the lineup. And so if you have one spot that's not great, I think it's fine. And if you kind of creatively platoon it, I think they can get by. And maybe then you make a trade at the deadline. Maybe Bohm's available at the deadline. Maybe, Yo Moncada signs with some place who's going to play him. And then the Yankees trade for him at the deadline.
My only concern about that is, and it's not a bad idea, but I have a feeling just based on past history with Boone, if you start out in theory that you're going to use Peraza and Cabrera, pretty soon you're going to see DJ LeMahieu every day.
Yeah, that's my concern. I think I wanted to talk about this. There was a Brian Hoke article that I don't think had any new reporting, though it was kind of hard to tell the way it was written. That basically was the Yankees think that maybe DJ will be fine. And these are mostly I think there were quotes from the Boone and Cashman's postseason press conference, and they were asking about LeMahieu's health, and they basically said he's better. I agree. I worry that this ends up with 2 months of LeMahieu. And the problem with that is that it takes time to know whether or not a player is going to be good again. I think that
good in 2 years.
He hasn't been good in 2 years. The ceiling is low, right? What's your base case scenario? A 700 OPS with a 350 on base, 350 slug? That's not good. Good good defense at third still, I guess. But like, no base running, no power. He's going to be 36 years old. Like, I think it's understandable that he can't really play anymore. And even if you want to say, hey, let's test the waters, like, it's baseball. We know that you can't just play a guy for 2 weeks and have a verdict on it. Like Rizzo, for instance, last year, you kept playing him basically the entire year because you weren't sure whether or not he was going to snap back into it, and he never did.
Right.
And I imagine, like, if we start the season with LeMahieu as the third baseman, like, he's the third baseman through the end of May at least.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I just don't trust Aaron Boone to do that. One thing I want to talk to you about, Tim, and I want to talk about Aaron Boone a little more, but this kind of strategic managing. But Mike Whiteman says that Bohm hit the ball all over the field. He may do well in Yankee Stadium. You're right that he hits the ball all over the field, but his home runs always go to left field and go to like left center. So I'm actually a little concerned if you look at a spray chart. I think he would have lost 5 home runs last year if he played all of his games at Yankee Stadium, or 4 home runs. That's not the worst ballpark in the league for him, but there's not that many better. And so I think Bohm, like, this is a problem for right-handed hitters in general for the Yankees, but I worry a little bit that he's someone who would actually be hurt, like Bregman, like Arenado, have trouble hitting home runs in Yankee Stadium. But also maybe that means more doubles and triples and singles and stuff because you have a big outfield. So, all right, Mike. So Tim, I had a thought, and I'm waiting to write this up until third or second base is resolved. But I think Aaron Boone's going to have to manage this season. Like, it's weird. He's got a deeper roster than previous years, but he has a roster like with guys that have like platoon issues and defense issues, and like guys that might need to be hit in radically different spots in the lineup depending on who you're facing. And I've never been as negative about Aaron Boone as you are. I'm still don't really like him very much. I don't know. I worry about relying on him to, like, pat, for example, bat Paul Goldschmidt third against lefties and 7th against righties, which is probably what should happen. Like, I don't think he's capable of that.
And I also think he's horrible at developing young players. I think the only times it happens, it's because his hand is forced. Like last year, if Trevino hadn't been hurt, Wells wouldn't have gotten the opportunity that he did.
It's true. I mean, Ray Wells was playing less than half of games with Trevino out there. And Trevino, he got like an okay start to the season, but he wasn't looking good by any means. And he was, his arm wasn't great. And he was basically the 1A to Wells's 1B. In his defense, Wells wasn't hitting to start the season. But I think we all looked at the StatCast numbers and said that's going to change. Because it was just kind of bad at ball luck. And then once Trevino does get hurt, I think he overused Wells, right? Like, Wells was clearly tired by September. Volpe clearly tired by September. He didn't use Peraza. He didn't use Cabrera. Like, he wants to write one lineup in that defers to veterans and doesn't change depending on your opponent very much. And to me, that is a disaster. Right, he never pulled Jazz Chisholm for defense late in games. He never barely pulled Gleyber Torres for defense late in games.
Yeah, and remember the one time when he benched Gleyber, he left him out there for an extra inning before he benched him because he said he didn't want to like shock Cabrera by sending him out there. And Cabrera you could drag him out of bed and he'd be ready to play.
I mean, I tell you, I really wonder if Torres is going to be a different player on another team. I think Detroit's a great place for him. Big outfield, right? Like, I can imagine Torres just like belting doubles everywhere. And like, AJ Hinch is a much different coach than Aaron Boone. And I can imagine AJ Hinch just kind of turning Torres into that player we all thought he always was.
Well, I also think it's interesting that they did not give Boone an extension.
No, you're right. That was very conspicuous at the time. People commented at the time saying, wait a second, they usually give the manager an extension. No, yeah, I think this is his year. Like, he has to perform this year.
And I think if they do that thing that they've been doing under him every year, where they go into that massive swoon, he might get fired.
Yeah, you're right. And, he's kind of out of excuses, right? The Yankees have, I think, put together a pretty good roster. I have my criticisms of Brian Cashman around young players and player development, but like when you don't get Juan Soto, like they did a pretty good job just kind of filling in around him. Between Max Fried and Devin Williams, really improving the pitching staff, and then Bellinger, Goldschmidt, right? Like that's really impressive. And if they add one more player for third base, then at basically no cost other than money, Cashman's kind of filled the roster out. It's a roster I'm kind of happy about for the first time in a while. You actually have a well-built roster, which we haven't seen for forever, really. I mean, the Yankees have had guys playing out of position forever. They've had guys who are injury prone. I mean, this is not an old roster, right? You got a lot of guys in their 20s still.
And the reliever they picked up from the Reds is a good one too. Cruz,
Fernando Cruz is interesting. Yeah, he's one of those like Matt Blake guys that I could imagine like really turning into a monster. He's got like the crazy splitter. I'm with you there. I
just need a lefty.
I still wish that one of the interesting stories that MLB Trade Rumors ran recently is that an unusual number of Yankees like player development coaches have left this season. And I wonder if that's a sign of a good thing or a bad thing. My indication is my instinct is to trash the Yankees farm system because it's been so terrible. But also you don't usually hire people from bad places. So I wonder if they have lots of really good, talented coaches working for them that people want to hire, but also like an overall structure that's bad. I don't know. It's a weird article. And Gary Phillips of the New York Daily News also didn't really know what to make of it, right? Like he got a lot of quotes from people from Kevin Reese being like, that's weird. A lot of guys left, but didn't have a good answer for is that a good or a bad thing?
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, but they have, I mean, if Dominguez pans out, which I think he will, then you look at, they have, who have they brought up? It would be Wells, Volpe, Dominguez, and Luis Gil.
And maybe Peraza, and maybe Clark Schmidt, maybe Peraza. They're really good at the top guys. Like Dominguez was the top international free agent signing. The other guys were first round picks other than Peraza and Cabrera. I don't know where Gil was. Gil probably wasn't, but they can bring the top guys up. There's just nobody behind them. Like the lack of before this season, Anthony Santander's, right? Guys who could put up 2.5 wins in the majors. They haven't brought any of those guys up in forever. Like I mean, Brett Gardner may be the last guy, right? I mean, it's been a long time. And Gardner was was a 3rd round pick. But was better than 2.5 wins. But like the last guy that wasn't a big top prospect that came up and was successful with the Yankees, hitters, pitchers. There's a few others, Jordan Montgomery, those guys, Nestor Cortez. But it is a wasteland out there. I mean, it's bad. The Brian Cashman is bad at this, and I don't understand how people aren't fired. Like I don't understand how if I'm the Yankees, like I go find like the best farm director in the in the minors and just pay him $5 million or something, right? I mean that's worth so much money. It's so valuable to have that. And the Yankees have had Damon Oppenheimer for a very long time, Kevin Reese now for a long time, and it's just gone nowhere. And it's just one of those things that I just don't think they care about. I just don't think Brian Cashman prioritizes it. But then you look at some other teams and you're like, I would have loved one of the Orioles extra outfielders this year. I would have loved one of the extra Detroit infielders or whatever, right? Like I need a stable of guys, not just like 4 first-round picks that all happen to hit. And they don't have that. And it's frustrating. It'd be nice to have a third baseman right now, right? Just someone who can play. It would have been nice to have a first baseman last year who can just kind of be okay. And maybe they evolve into a Christian Walker or someone like that. Christian Walker was one of those guys when Goldschmidt was blocking him. And then he became a really good major league player. And those guys are all over the majors. Like most major league players are that. And the Yankees just have nothing. And it's not like they're, it's not like you can like look around the majors and find guys they've traded away who are that. There's like 3 of them. There's like Thairo Estrada, who signed a 1-year deal with the Rockies, so like not that great. And really, like that's it. Like a lot of the guys.
I thought he came back to the Yankees.
Thairo, no, he was talking about that. They were talking with him. Apparently, they were considering him, but he signed it with the Rockies because I guess he could probably get full playing time. But you know, like I used to think that the problem was the Yankees didn't want to call guys up, and I think now the problem is that they're just not good at developing guys who aren't that great. Like I think maybe they just don't prioritize it. They do it for pitchers, right? They can bring up lots of pitchers who are fine, but like you know, if I just take like a random organization, I take what's a good middle of the road organization like I take
Guardians.
The Guardians I think are really good at this, but like the Nationals. Right. Like I look at the Nationals roster and there's a bunch of guys that I would love to just kind of have around on the Yankees. Nathaniel Lowe's a guy that they traded for, but like from the Rangers, and he's just like a 2.5 win player. And like that kind of guy would have saved the Yankees, would have been a 4-win improvement over what they got last year. Right. At first base. And there's just lots of those guys throughout the majors. You know, the average player is average. Average player is a 2-win player. And just none of them come out of the Yankees. It's amazing. It's always fun for me to look at like an old Athletics roster and like look at how much talent was there like 6 years ago. And it was both guys like Matt Olson, like really impressive guys, but also just like a lot of dudes who are just playing baseball and good at it. And the Yankees just don't do that. So yeah, it annoys me. Like the Athletics brought up Lawrence Butler this year, who was a 3-win player, and like it just kind of came out of nowhere, and that just never happens to the Yankees, and it just absolutely kills me.
Another name that I saw was Whit Merrifield.
Oh, I hate it. I
don't like it either. Let
me look at his stats from last year, but like, like he had a 684 OPS last year, or no, less than that. He had 625 OPS. He was a little better with Atlanta than the Phillies. He's a replacement player. Like he's a beat up old veteran. He's not good. And
I didn't endorse it. I just said
but I feel like that's what we're going to end up with. We're going to end up with someone like that.
Well, we have that. We have DJ LeMahieu.
Well, like I think Merrifield might be better than LeMahieu. That's not saying much.
I think you're better than LeMahieu.
I don't know. You haven't seen me throw. But like I think that Oswald Cabrera and Peraza platooning are better.
I think they've fallen in love with the notion of Cabrera as the Swiss Army knife.
I get it, but you can move him, right? You could start at one position and end at another position. Like that happens.
Right.
I think he's depth, and I think he's depth who can hit right-handed pitching, which is good. And he can't hit left-handed pitching, and he needs someone to hit lefty pitching. And I think you can find that guy. The reason why I like Peraza is like, so usually you're a guy who's a right-handed platoon hitter, right? He's not playing a lot because you're not seeing a lot of lefties. And so he's got to do something else on the bench. And Peraza can run and he can field. He is a great fielder who's now played short, second, and third quite a lot in the minors. And I'm sure could probably play outfield if you gave him some reps in spring training. And like, that's good. Like to me, that's what you need. And then he plays, once or twice a week against lefties. Maybe you sit Cody Bellinger occasionally against lefties. There's a way to do this. And like they've just shown no interest in that from Peraza. Peraza had a really good second half last year. He was really good against lefties in the minors. He's a talented player. He's only 24. And I feel like right now, their absolute minimum is going to be finding a replacement for Peraza. Now, Peraza is also out of options, so they might trade him after that. And it wouldn't shock me if Peraza ends up with like a Thairo Estrada-esque career where you look up and all of a sudden he's like a 4-win player for the Giants. You go, what the hell happened there?
Or he could be like Jorge Mateo with the Orioles.
Yeah, right. I mean, a player who, like what? He was like wait, did he just get non-tendered, I think?
Who?
Or Jorge Mateo, or he's in arbitration.
He's in a free agent.
He was a 668 OPS last year, but he was a good enough player, 1 win in 208 plate appearances because he does other things really well. Yeah, I it surprises me that the Yankees haven't tried something like that.
Well, I think a lot of, I mean, I lay a lot of it at Boone's feet because he doesn't have the patience or the ability to be patient and to be supportive with these younger guys. I remember a couple of the younger guys who aren't with the organization anymore saying that he barely talked to them.
Yeah,
And,
when you hear his interviews, he talks a lot about like, Anthony Volpe figuring something out, and I've seen the John Boy guys asking basically like, where do you get that from? And he's like, well, he kind of figured it out on his own. And the guys are like, what, you don't coach him? And he's like, no, that's being a major leaguer. Being a major leaguer means figuring out how to coach yourself, basically.
yeah, he's not.
That doesn't sound right to me.
No.
Like Volpe was 22 years old. Like, you got to coach him, and you got to, and coaching him doesn't just mean shielding him from the media or defending him or yelling at umpires. It might mean actually coaching. And I bet other organizations do more coaching of players.
And the Yankees have had managers who were, I mean, Joe Torre was great with young players. And, going way back, Billy Martin, he developed a lot of good young players.
Yeah, I just think they have this like Yankee philosophy that just doesn't work with young players. Like this, we're bigger than everyone, right? We're the Yankees. We're wearing pinstripes. That's different than that's different than I think other teams where they're they're not up their own ass as much with young players. And Girardi was the same way as Boone. Right. And you can see it. Like the Yankees, Girardi brought up Brett Gardner. I think he came up under Girardi. Maybe he came up under Torre, but he became a major league player, a full-time player under Girardi. And no one else.
You know who you're right, because you remember around the same time that Brett Gardner came up, Melky Cabrera was there.
Yep.
And Girardi did not handle him well.
And Melky went on to have an average major league career. Now, not like he wasn't a star. He was a star the one season, got caught for PEDs.
But he was a solid player.
Yeah, like he was a guy that I remember when Joe Torre, Melky's rookie season, I think it was. Bernie Williams was really on his last legs, and Bernie Williams in his heyday had no arm. Right, he had a noodle arm, even in the 90s. And at this point in time, he was beat up. He wasn't playing well. He wasn't fielding well. He really should have just been a DH. And Melky would start a game in right field, and then Torre replaced him with Bernie Williams as a defensive replacement because he didn't trust him or whatever. Or Melky was just a better fielder by a mile at the time. He was a better hitter too on that team. But like, to me, that is just such a Yankee thing to do, right? Like the veteran is the guy who can field the ball, not the young guy. Like, no, like the young guy who has an arm and like Cabrera had, looking at this, a 14-year major league career. He was a 21 win player over the course of his career.
2,000 hits.
Yeah, like he could have done that for the Yankees, and it's kind of.
I think he actually had a better career than Gardner.
Oh no! Look at Gardner's numbers. Gardner's like a 50-win player. Like Brett Gardner Brett Gardner deserves to have like a Monument Park plaque. Like
No, but I mean, Melky hit 285, close to 2,000 hits.
Yeah, but Gardner was a way better base runner and defender.
Right. No, but I'm just saying, had he been handled differently, I think he could have done a lot of that with the Yankees.
Cabrera could have been your everyday corner outfielder for a long time with the Yankees. Right. And like, it's kind of hard to judge some of his stats because he had that PED suspension. But like, he had seasons where he was a 4-win player, a 4.5-win player, a 5-win player, a 3.5-win player, 2.5-win player, right? Like, this is a guy who could play. And the Yankees never gave him a chance. And that's exactly I think he's the last like average-ish player, like full-time major league player that they that they brought up. We have a couple of comments here. One from Rick. So yeah, Rick's an Oakland fan, and I'm sorry, Rick. I'm sorry. Hopefully you're not an Oakland fan who lives in Oakland. But they become the farm system for the team playing the A's. I think it's true, right? Like I think the A's managed to bring up to put teams together. You go down the list of players who like had really good careers and win awards that started with the A's, and it's amazing, right? Sonny Gray was an A originally. He's really good. Frankie Montas was an Athletic originally. Josh Donaldson came up with the A's and was traded after one season. Like Matt Olson, like half the Braves, right? Like it is like, let me just pick a team, like the 2016 A's, I think we're good, right? So I look at the 2016 A's. Okay, they weren't good. The 2018 A's won 97 games. Marcus Semien, right? Matt Chapman, Matt Olson, K-Ris Davis, Dustin Fowler was on that team. Sean Manaea, it was on that team. Like they could put together guys. Brett Trinan, who just won the World Series for the Dodgers, right? Like they could put together really talented teams. And like, why don't the Yankees just hire their farm? Like, forget getting their players, hire their farm guy. Like their farm guy is a hell of a lot better than whoever the Yankees have been rolling out there. Part of that's because they draft higher, but I doubt it. Like I bet a lot of these guys were later round draft picks. They're better at developing players. They prioritize it. They make it a part of their game, and they have to because they constantly turn their roster over. The Guardians do it. The Padres do it. The Dodgers do it. And the Yankees would have killed for a Lars Nootbaar from the Cardinals or a James Outman from the Dodgers, an Andy Apagas. Like those guys are a dime a dozen in the majors, and they just never come from the Yankees. It's amazing. They do have a younger roster than they've ever had right now, right? This is like since the 90s, they haven't had this many young players around. Some of it has been trades, right? Like and signings, right? They brought in Jazz Chisholm. And some of it's been that they had a couple of first round picks that did well, and that's fine. But one thing that's interesting to me is that Volpe and Wells both did really well after 2020. And I wonder if being away from the team's development for a year actually did good for them. Like Volpe was the best hitter in the minors in 2021. Wells took a little bit longer to develop, but he also like took a big step forward around that time. He was drafted, I believe, in 2020. And I just wonder if that's just an indictment of the Yankees. Like maybe Dominguez also. Dominguez was like 16, I think, so he was pretty young. But I don't think that you can look at the current roster and say it's a successful farm system.
No, and the other thing is, look at Luis Gil. He would not have been in the starting rotation. He wouldn't have been on the major league roster if Garrett Cole hadn't gotten hurt.
I think I give, especially pitching in general, but Hill, I give the Yankees a little bit of a pass forward just because like none of us were thinking about him going into the season. Like, right. Like Luis Hill is, came out of nowhere. And the second he like comes to spring training, he's throwing 98, he's looking awesome. We were all like, okay, yeah, like give me Luis Hill. But like I think he was like in the 20s in the prospect list that year. Like I don't think anyone thought he was a real major league option until he basically forced his way on there. But like good teams do that. Like good teams are supposed to have a Luis Gil show up frequently. Yeah, the Yankees had Nestor Cortez show up a few years ago. That counts, I think. Right. Jordan Montgomery became a real major league starter. I think that counts. And they also
Clark
have these
Schmidt.
kind of Clark Schmidt. Well, Clark Schmidt was a first round pick.
Right.
Like they're hating on their first round picks. And frankly, the more I read about George Lombard Jr., the more I think they may hit on him. So like, I think they're good at that level. I just think that like they need to be hitting on second and third and fourth and fifth round picks too. Like that happens. Right. And they end up picking like weird players a lot of the time. This year's draft was interesting. I've been kind of getting ready to do a farm system episode for the Bronx Beat podcast. They did the weird thing that kind of stuck out of the time where they drafted, I think 10 out of 10, like big, high stuff, low results, college pitchers. And like at the time I kind of like, I don't know, thought that they were making a really smart move. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, I don't think you give them the benefit of the doubt. I think they gave up. I think they said we can't find college hitters who are any good, so we're just going to pick 10 guys that we think that Matt Blake and co can just kind of go crazy on, and maybe a couple of them will work out. And like, I think that's giving in. That's surrendering to your weakness. And now they're going to have basically no one. Like they're going to have like an empty farm system of hitters, and they already are empty. They already need guys, and that's going to hurt in a couple of years when Volpe starts getting a little expensive and all of that.
Right.
Rick mentions Cruz, Hill, and Cousins. Like those are the guys the Yankees are good at. Like I still have confidence that they could have. They can find some of those guys, and like Fernando Cruz, they might like unlock something that the Reds couldn't. Like I think is very possible. I don't think, like, had they signed, say, like Walker Buehler, I would have been like, oh, I think Matt Blake's got a thing on Walker Buehler. And I think that they'll find another one or two of those guys, which to me could be a really good bullpen, right? If you have
Beater might be in there too.
I think Beater looked really good late in the season. Also, Chase Hampton apparently looked really good when he came back from injury. Excuse me. So like, I think the Yankees could have a really good pitching staff next year. Like, I think an underrated pitching staff.
They just need one or two lefties in the bullpen.
And I think they'll sign someone. They were connected to Brooks Rowley. I have never actually looked up his stats. Let's take a look.
They've been, and Chaffee, isn't there? Or
Chafin, who I think it would be a shame that he'd have to shave his beard. He's got a wonderful mountain man kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
But he as with Tim Hill, Chafin looks like he's either like a California beach bum or like a ski bum, or like, works out of a trailer in the back of a yard somewhere. Brooks Raley's pretty good. I don't know. That's pretty good stats. I don't know much about him, but he looks like a lefty. He's a lefty reliever and he's pretty good. They're going to sign someone. I don't really like, there's no use in predicting who the lefty is, because it'll be somebody. I hope it's somebody established. Like they can try to find another Tim Hill. They can try to like make some magic out of that, but like they need one guy in the bullpen to get out lefties, particularly the Red Sox lefties. If the Red Sox are the real competition this year, which I think they will be, the Red Sox have like 8 lefties in their lineup. Like they can't have an all right-handed bullpen against that. Like if they have 4 out of 5 lefties to start their lineup, like you gotta get Devers out, you gotta get Casas out, you gotta get Duran out, and right now there's no one to do that.
If they trade Stroman, they could sign Tanner Scott. He hasn't been signed.
I don't know if they have the money. Like I think if the Yankees have the money to pay $15 million for a player, like I think they're going after Arenado or someone like that. Like they're going after like a good third baseman.
Right.
So like I don't think it's gonna be Tanner Scott. Jeff Hoffman just signed. How much did he sign for? Actually, I don't know. But like he was a guy that I thought they might go get, but like they just couldn't afford him. So Hoffman got $11 million per year for 3 years, $33 million. So like with some incentives, I guess. So like, I don't think they have $11 million in the budget for a reliever. They have like $5 million for a reliever, and that's if they get a relatively cheap infielder. I'm fine with Tim Hill. Like I think Tim Hill was great last year.
Yeah, I think he'd be good too.
It won't cost that much. Like someone like that's just kind of what they need, and then they can bring in some guys to spring training and try to find some magic. Like I'm just looking on the 40-man. If there's anyone that I can imagine, like lefties, I can imagine them really turning into something. Not really, to be honest. There's a lot of righties. Ben Shields, but he was unprotected in the Rule 5 draft and no one took him. There's honestly not a lot. There's some righties. Clayton Beater, I think you're right, is your best candidate. But yeah, it's not a great list of players. The farms. I mean, when we do the farm system episode here, it's empty. It's bad. Like the Yankees farm system is in trouble right now. Tim, we're running out of time. We're near the top of the hour. Rick asked, so the Yankees are over the cap as usual. Kind of. I mean, there's not really a cap, so we don't really know what their budget is, but they're right under $300 million right now. They're 303 right now, and they'll trade Stroman, so they'll be a little bit under that. So we assume about 300 is their max. They were at 303 last year, and so that's probably whatever you save in trading Stroman. That's probably how much you have left to play with. And you want some extra money to do deadline additions and that kind of thing. Tim, been wonderful. I'm glad we talked for an hour. Thank you for joining me, everybody. Paul Paul will be back next week. He'll show us his report from Disney World, maybe the future home of the Rays. I don't know. And everybody have a wonderful night. This has been your Start Spreading the News show.